everybody. Welcome to another edition of We Talk Photo. I am one of your hosts, John Pedersen, and with me always is Mr. Jack Graham. How you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing great. From rainy and stormy, thunder and lightning, Smoky Mountains in Tennessee.
Wow, yeah, it's been quite warm up here. You're missing the 100-degree heat up here in the Pacific Northwest. So
No, not.
yeah, exactly. Well, we don't have humidity, so
Yeah.
there's that. So, folks, today we have an absolutely fantastic guest coming to us from Sydney, Australia.
Is this the furthest, John, that we've ever had anybody?
I think it's the furthest away. He gets the prize for sure. So it's early in the morning for him, and it's late, not later, but it's not late, but it's later for us doing this podcast. So, folks, please welcome Ignacio Palacios. Thank you for coming on our show today.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Jack, for having me here today. Yeah. As you said, I'm in Sydney in the middle of the winter, and but it's still 17 degrees, so pretty mild.
That's not bad at all.
That's roughly 65 or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, if I'm right. So that's a good thing. Well, thank you for being here. You know, we most of the people we have on, I'd say at least half are probably good friends of ours. The other half are people that we have contacted and found their work. And I found Ignacio's work through some other people that I know, and I was just blown away by what he does. For those of you that are near a computer while you're, listening to this, his web address is that's Ignacio Palacios, iptravelphotography.com.au. And if you want to take a gander at that while we talk together here, I think you'll know why it was high on my list to have Ignacio with us. Well, thank you for being here. Tell us how Ignacio Palacios found his way to Sydney, Australia.
Sydney, Australia. Well, that was in 2008, I believe. I was traveling. I was in a long trip around the world. I think I was traveling for 22 months nonstop, just visiting some countries and photographing. And I met an Australian girl when I was in a train in India. Now I married her, but now she's my ex-wife. But that's why I settled in Australia. After that long trip, I decided to stay in Sydney. It's a beautiful city, beautiful country, and now I have a couple of kids, so I live in Sydney, Australia.
And I see a lot of your trips are in Asia. You spend a lot of time around Asia, so it's probably a little easier to get to than, say, if you lived in New York or somewhere.
I have traveled a lot in Asia. In India, particularly, it's a country that I love. I've been seven or eight times over there, and I love Nepal and on the Himalayas and the mountains. So it's a place that I tend to go a lot. I haven't organized a lot of photography tours to Southeast Asia, but a couple to India, and now I'm doing one to Bhutan. But I travel, or I organize photography workshops anywhere really. South America is where I started, in Patagonia, Chile, Bolivia, Argentina. I'm doing one in Colombia, and then I'm starting to do quite a few tours as well in Africa. So anywhere.
let me ask you about going to Colombia for this. You're the first person I've seen run a workshop in Colombia. What's there? What's the attraction?
Well, to be honest, there is a place where I really want to go. It's called Caño Cristales, which is a river that has some very beautiful colors and textures. So that's one of my, I've been working on a book about South America for a very long time. And this is one of the places that has to be in the book. And so sometimes I'm driven to go to some places, because I need to finalize some projects or because my clients or guests are asking me to go. I think it has beautiful villages and a beautiful culture, and I think, to photograph people as well will be very interesting, and wildlife. It has a lot of birds. I'm not really a bird photographer, but it has a lot of beautiful birds, monkeys, and so it's quite a lot of wildlife in the Amazon over there. So I'm looking forward to explore there.
There's only one person, and I'm, we don't really know each other, so don't get mad at me when I compliment you too much, Ignacio, but there's only one person I know other than you that I can see in your work that can successfully photograph wildlife, landscape, and travel people at a very high level, and that's Art Wolf. He does it. And Art, if you're listening to this, I hope you are. Please come on with us. We'd love it to have you. Art is just he can do that. I think you do it equally as well, which is a high compliment.
Yeah. Well, that is a very high compliment. I mean, Art has been a person I have been looking at for many, many years. He's been an inspiration for me to travel and to photograph, and I have all of his books. I have some of his prints as well, the editions book. So I know his work very, very well, and I have been following him for the last 25 years. So it's an amazing experience for me to work with him. When I went with him to
you did?
I have worked with him 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
In the Atacama in Chile. I've been with him in Lofoten in Norway, and I have been with him in Antarctica, I think. Was it Antarctica? And Patagonia. Patagonia, Atacama, Lofoten, and I would love to do a few more tours with him.
Well, if you're working with Art, you're at the top of the food chain, because I know he's very, very picky on who he works with, and looking at your work, it reminded me of what Art did. So it's funny that came to be.
I think he's very talented, and he is very, very curious, and also has a lot of energy even at his age.
You think?
So he travels all the time, and he knows a lot about the cultures and the countries. He's traveled everywhere, so that's because he has.
He's a fun guy. I mean, he's
very fun.
He can be a little crazy, but he's a lot of fun to be around, and he's like I say, your work is. I mean, it's on that level. And that's how
I still have a few years to go before I can produce. I think he has about 100 books. I think I have 10 or 12 books, but it's still a while to go.
Yeah. Speaking of your books, I was scanning it earlier and saw that we have another mutual friend in Mark Adamus. He wrote the foreword for your Patagonia book.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Have you worked with him much or know him much?
I think Mark is. I don't know him, but I know that he's more of most lonely guy who organizes tours on his own. I would love to do something with him, and I have proposed to do something together in Australia, for example. And I was actually thinking of joining one of his tours in Pakistan, which is a location that I really want to go. I haven't been to those locations, and he's organizing tours there. I might join when I have some time, but I'm really busy with my own tours. And I couldn't do that one. But hopefully we get to meet at some point, either Australia, New Zealand, or one of his tours. But his work is unbelievable. I really love his work, and he was actually. I asked him to write the foreword of my book in Patagonia, because he was the reason that one of the photographs that is in the book that actually he sent to me, and I sent a picture to him as well, of Brazil. He made a comment in Instagram about one of my images being amazing and one of the top 10 images that he's ever seen. So I sent him a big print, and then he sent me that picture of Patagonia, which was my favorite image of Patagonia of him. And that is the picture of Patagonia that made me, pretty much quit my job and organize my first photography tour to Patagonia, because I love that image. And I have never been able to photograph that particular view, because actually it takes a long time to get to that point. And every time I go with guests, we don't have the time to do that walk. But, I was always intrigued by that image, because it's like, how have you got this? From where, from which point? Because either you cross this river with a canoe, or you have to hike for 2 days, and you have to get permits. So so I was really intrigued.
Knowing Mark, he probably hiked for 2 days. And
yeah.
Well, we're trying to get Mark on. I talked to Mark on the phone probably about 2 months ago, trying to get him here on the podcast. And he's traveling so much. But when I do talk to him, and he's on the list to call here in the next couple of weeks, I'll make sure he listens. I know he listens to this podcast, and I'll make sure that he gets in contact. I'll ask him to contact you, and you two would be. It would be if I was 100 years younger, I would love to be with the two of you guys. That would be.
Yeah, we have a few clients, common clients, and they are asking the same. They are asking us to do something and I would love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you will. Ignacio, this is a crazy question. I don't know how else to ask it, but you are really into texture and presence. Am I right? I mean, is that what you look for? It's
I have
subject matter.
If I do like to photograph any subject, but I'm really drawn around abstracts as well. And when you say textures or shapes,
right,
I find a lot of those when I photograph from the air, from an airplane or from a chopper. So I photographed quite a bit in Australia. There are amazing locations for aerial photography. And so there are many different colors and shapes, so and then you can create beautiful abstracts from that. So yeah, I really like that, as well as other subjects, but that is something that, I really enjoy.
But there's something about, and I've been trying to put words around what I feel when I look at your images. And there's something, and I've not been able to put words to it. There's something magical about them. There's a feel to them. It's very natural is the first word. So it's obvious you don't over process your images, but they're incredibly vibrant and realistic, and have this, as Jack said, they have this presence about them. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Normally I can find the words to describe photographs, but with yours, I struggle to find the right words, because they're so beautiful, and it's very hard to describe what they are. I mean, what this is that I'm feeling, but there's a presence about them that it makes me feel like I'm in the landscape, and I can feel the emotion of the landscape.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I if a part of my work I do actually process my image, and some of them I process them quite a bit actually. Basically, I try to capture something, and I try not to do a lot of processing to my image. But sometimes, you know, if I'm not completely happy with the result, and I think the image has potential to, by doing something extra or processing, or, you know, even a composite, you know, I always go as far as I have to go until I'm happy with the result. Sometimes I'm very, very happy and I don't touch it any further. But if I'm not completely happy and I know that adding some stuff or removing some elements from the image is gonna make it better, then I do that. So I have no problem with that. But I'm also very honest about what I do. So yeah.
I mean, even the ones that could be heavily processed, they don't look like it. You know, you've probably seen a lot of images that almost look like digital art. They're so heavily processed, but yours retains this very natural feel to it.
Yeah, well, that's the purpose. I mean, you have to, you know, try to process an image until you're happy with it. But also it has to look natural. I don't like some of those images that look oversaturated, or, you know, HDR, or so they also have to look nice and not so processed and natural. I mean,
Agreed. You
know,
go ahead, Jack.
No, the other thing I was going to ask, not to change the subject, but, you know, you market yourself, and this is, I think, really, really smart. A lot of us, me included, you know, we walk around and people say, well, what kind of, you know, we're a nature photographer, whatever that means. You market yourself as a travel photographer. And now after talking with you, and, you know, I did really get into your information. I think it's really smart, because it is exactly what you do. I think that you travel, and that's photography is part of it, but I think that it sounds like the experience is every bit as important as the photographs, and it shows with your work.
Yeah, I've been traveling for, this is actually my 25-year anniversary. That was actually last Sunday. 25 years ago, I took a plane to the US, to New York. It was my dream to travel to the US, and in particularly to New York. And so I went and I spent 4 months. And my father was a professional photographer, as well as my grandfather. So I took a camera and 100 rolls of film, and I photographed the whole east of the US and Canada, and that's really was the start of my career, or my, you know, as a photographer. So that was 25 years ago. When I started traveling, I was basically a tourist. You know, I wanted to see the Twin Towers at that time, and the Empire State and Central Park, and take a snap. But then some of those images, when I came back home, my father looked at them and they said, wow, this is good, this composition. And I had never studied anything. I wasn't actually interested in photography that much, because my father was a photographer, and my father wanted me to continue with the business. But my father was more like a wedding commercial photographer, as well as my grandfather. I was not interested in weddings. I was not interested in anything like in photography or being on a shop. I wanted to travel, but that trip and the pictures that I took, kind of like, you know, that was the catalyst, really. Because after that trip, I went to the Middle East for 3 months, and then I went to India and Sri Lanka. So I started to do a few more trips, and then from being a tourist, I became a traveler. And then after those trips to Middle East and Asia, India, I just said, look, this is what I want to do. And I quit my job. I'm an engineer. Quit my job in Madrid as an engineer, and I started to travel around the world for 22 months, 24 months, until I settled in Australia. And then when I was in Australia, I was doing quite a bit of traveling as well, but I started that was a part-time job whilst I was also doing engineering. And then there was a point when I decided to go 100% full-time professional photography. And that was in, I think it was 2010. Yeah.
You know, it's you know, the places you go, I mean, it's not, you know, John and I, we go to the Palouse, and we go to the Oregon coast, and we go to the Olympic Peninsula and the Smoky Mountains and all these places. And, you know, it's not, I mean, we have to make sure everything works, and, you know, hotel rooms, all that. But I mean, when you're going to Bhutan and Patagonia and, you know, the places you go, part of what your value is, you know your way around, and that's again shows in your work. You look, you know, the places that I see your images, it looks like you're very comfortable in it. It's part of
I mean, the more you travel, the more confident you are. You know, I've been in nearly 100. I think next year I'm gonna hit 100 countries, and I have done, because I write diaries about every trip I do. I have done nearly 200 trips since I started. So that 200 trips all over the world, and so you get comfortable about, you know, talking to people anywhere, and then what to do if you want to take a picture of someone on the street, or like all of that is just natural now, and that's what I teach during my workshops. But it doesn't come naturally, or, you know, if it's the first time you go to Africa, or the first time you go to South America or Southeast Asia or India, sometimes it can be a shock and you don't know what. So you need to I always recommend to at least to do one of these photography workshops with someone who knows the area, because I also did the same. I also did a photography workshop and some one-on-one lessons with some photographers that were, for me, inspirations, and that is very valuable. And I learned a lot. And I think it's something that is a very good experience to have.
Wow, you have a lot of miles, a lot of miles.
And the list is still growing. You know, like when you travel, and then you find out about more things about that country, or you meet other travelers, and I've been there, it's amazing, that wasn't in my list, but I can't do it, so I have to come back. So there are so many places or countries, areas that I have been, and then I'm still finding out more and more. So the list of places to photograph is just growing all the time. And then there are photographers that I follow, they go to some locations, new locations that I don't, oh my God, this is amazing, I have to go there too. So it's just never ends.
How do you manage your gear? How do you manage your gear? I mean, you probably have that down. I mean, you know what to pack and what to take, what not to take.
Yeah, my bag is always ready to go. So I have a lot of different brands. I'm not a Nikon ambassador or anything like that. I've been shooting Nikon for 25 years, but I enjoy also photographing with other brands. So I use Pentax and Fuji, but I'm now I'm 49, and I'm trying to reduce the amount of equipment that I have at the moment. So I'm trying.
You're a kid, Ignacio. You're a kid.
Yeah, but it's still when I pack 10, 12 kilos or more on my back, if I go to Patagonia, then my knees are starting to get really, really painful sometimes. So I need to reduce my equipment, and also so I'm trying to stick with one brand at the moment, and that's Nikon for me. So I have bought the new mirrorless camera is this year. It's my first mirrorless camera, and nice. So it's really nice, and so
a lot of places you can't carry. I mean, some of these little airplanes that you fly on, you can only carry a very small pack, and weight is very restricted.
Yeah, when you fly on a helicopter, normally, well, it depends, but normally I fly with two bodies, and 2470 and 7200. That's okay, but not with your bag, just with the two cameras around your neck. No lens hoods or anything like that, or caps, and
all adds up.
Yeah, it does. How much aerial photography do you do? Do you try to do it in every location that you go to, or just certain areas?
Yeah, if there is a place where I have, every time, of course, I research the area very well, and then if I find locations where it would be interesting to do some area photography, I do. And yeah, nearly every trip I try to do area photography. We did aerial in Brazil around Rio. We went photographing Lençóis Maranhenses, an amazing location for photography. Area photography in Australia is incredible. I'm now planning a trip to Kauai, and I've done it before, but of course that's mandatory to take a helicopter off Kauai. I don't know how you pronounce that. Kauai. It's an amazing, one of my favorite islands in the world. It's unbelievable. Then when I went to reunions, also area photography. If I can do aerial, I do area photography. Sometimes if it's allowed with a drone, you can do it, but in some places you can't do that with a drone.
That's what I was going to ask you, if you also use a drone along with your helicopters. So I pack always 2 drones just in case I crash one, so I have always 2 drones in my bag. So there are some beautiful locations to use drones. In some places still there aren't so many restrictions, like in some places in Puna, Argentina, in Bolivia. These are locations which are absolutely stunning, and where you can still use a drone without any problem. Yeah, that's fascinating. Can I switch real quick and talk about all the books that you've written? So you have a lot of books, and one of the ones that I think I want to get, because I love the concept. I've not seen somebody do this, and that was the where you dissect award-winning shots and talk about the structure, the color, the messaging in these shots. You take images and you sort of deconstruct them and talk about what works and why it works.
Yes, came a couple of months ago from China. So it's an awesome book. Everything I know about photography is there. This started about 5 or 6 years ago. Some of my award-winning images, I wanted to talk about them, but I wanted to explain and understand why they have been successful. And a lot of them have the same ingredients. So, I started to write about these images, the story about the image, and why it worked in some competitions compositionally. Is the composition, is the story, the narrative, is the light. So I talk about all of this for each of the images, and there are 40 articles, 40 images, 40 articles, and 280 pages. It's really intense because I talk about harmony, like everything in the image is completely dissected. Like I read so many books about composition, and I have taken, every piece that I know from these books, articles that I have read, and then put everything together into this book and talk about those images. So I think it's a very good educational book, and I don't explain the processing with Photoshop that I do, but I have the steps and I have the original image, and how do I go from the original to the final image as well. So
that's fantastic. I think what I love about this is it's talking about the art of composition, really. everything that goes into a composition, why it works and why it doesn't. And that's the artistry that I don't think enough people teach anymore. We talk about the technology side of things, how to move a slider, how to process stuff and camera stuff, but not enough people talk about the art.
Yeah, composition is the most important thing that you need to learn in photography by far. You learn by looking at images in books from well-known photographers. You learn by entering competitions and looking at the winners, the finalists. You learn by looking, and then also by photographing and removing distracting elements from the image, making things simple. But composition is number one. I did another book about composition. The whole book is about composition, the 10 ingredients of composition mastery. And, you know, some people, you know, that they learned about composition. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's quicker, but is the key in photography, composition. I mean, light is important. Technique is important, but if you have technique and good light, but composition is not good, then you don't have a good picture. If you have composition, but you have bad light, or you know, or the technique is not perfect, you still have an amazing image. Important is to have a great composition. If you add good light, and if you add the narrative, if the picture is also telling a story, then you have an award-winning shot. So composition, then narrative, light, technique. But composition is number one for sure.
And I think the other thing, I totally agree with what you said. And I think the other thing that resonates with me with what you said was examining, you know, you examine every element in this composition. And for folks listening, you know, it's the details that matter. You know, it's the details that make a good image great, and obsessing over everything about it, the texture, shape, pattern, color, leading lines, the emotion, the story, the subject, the light, elevation of your tripod. Every little thing matters to make a great composition.
Yeah.
That's, you know, it's funny that, and I'm gonna buy this book. You know, probably, I don't even know. Let's see, I'm old, Ignacio, and I'm gonna say that probably 15 years ago, and I've got about 20 images done, and they're here, and I've got to still finish it. But I started doing it it's actually up on my blog. I started doing a thing called Which One Works. And I had some images where I actually showed GPS coordinates standing 5 feet away. What a difference that can make in the composition. And I think too many people, I think John hit the nail on the head. Too many people worry about, you know, everything but the detail. And sometimes it's that small little thing that makes a great image, a really amazing image. And do you ship internationally? People get
during my tours, one of the things that I try to teach people is in terms of composition. You know, you go to Patagonia and it's amazing, the mountains, or Atacama, or like some of these incredible locations and mountains. And then you are surrounded by mountains, the wind, the smells, the animals. And then you just try to capture everything with a wide angle. And then you look at the image when you go home, and it's like, that was a really nice landscape, but it's not a really nice picture. No. So the difference is when you are there and you have all those feelings and you try to capture that, then you go home, it's like, yeah, well, it was amazing being there. And you see the image, it's like, and I say, there is a big difference between having a nice, or taking a great landscape, or taking a great photograph. It's not the same. When you are trying to get a good photograph, you have to try to make it simple and find all those compositional elements that lead to your subject. So you have to have a strong subject, but also leading lines, light, all those ingredients or aspects, try to put them together to make something strong. And that is maybe not a nice landscape, but it's a very nice picture. But sometimes, we tend to photograph the whole landscape with a wide angle and thinks, oh, those mountains are very small, or this doesn't lead anywhere, or what is the subject? So it's a nice landscape when you're there and we take the picture, but not a great picture.
Yeah.
I always tell people if that's what they want to do, they could go buy a postcard. And that'll accomplish the same thing. You have a lot of books, and I know that hopefully there's a couple here I'm gonna buy. You do ship internationally, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And do you or have you done any work? Do you have anything planned here in America? Probably not.
I am planning. Yeah.
Oh,
As
really?
I said, I'm planning if you look in my tours in my website for 2025, I'm doing a tour to photograph tornadoes.
Oh.
Yeah, and before that, I'm going to stop in Kauai for 4 nights. So I'm doing Kauai and then the tornadoes. And then the same year, I'm planning to do something similar, the cypress swamps in Texas and Louisiana in October, November, the Everglades. And then also probably I will stop in Hawaii, maybe in the Big Island. And yeah, because those tours, the cypress swamps and the tornadoes are just very short. It's only a week. So I try to combine that with a little short trip somewhere else. And
just so you know, the tornadoes, you could go for a week and not even have a drop of rain. So you got to be pretty lucky to get in on that.
A lot of driving.
Get in on that scene. And there are many people, you probably know who they are, good quality people that lead us. John, we do have people all over the world that listen to this podcast, and I hope that they'll check out your books and your tours. Man, I want to go on one. You're
come on.
You're booking 20. You're doing 2025. I'm just hoping I can live to 2025.
If you join to one of my tours, I'll give you one book for free, Jack.
Oh, nice.
There you go. Yeah. What do you have coming up that people may want to know about?
Look, this year has been quite quiet because during COVID I didn't organize much. So I've been just running the tours that were postponed from the COVID times. Mm-hmm. And I've done a couple of tours in South America this year, and I did Svalbard. I'm going to Sumatra in August, but that's just a personal trip. It's a scouting trip because I'm planning to take a group there to photograph orangutans. But my next trip is to Bhutan. That's in October. So that's my next trip and my final trip for this year. I also have a trip to Colombia actually in October, November. So those are the last 2 trips of the year, Bhutan and Colombia. But
have you been to Bhutan before?
I have been to most of the Himalayas, but not to Bhutan. So I've been to Nepal 3-4 times. I
hear that airport is quite fun.
Yeah, the landing is one of the most exciting landings in the world. Yeah, so
Well, John. John's going to put up some show notes, and he'll tell you. We'll feature. We'll talk about your books and your trips. But man, folks, take advantage of Ignacio. Man, he's amazing. I'm so glad that we had you here. God, time went so fast. God. Will you come back?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I'll get a hold of Mark to Adamus and tell him to make sure that you guys do something.
I'd personally like to do a whole program on dissecting images and talk about things. I think that would be, not to give away your whole book, but but just to talk about that and understand the depth that you go through to dissect these images. I love that kind of stuff.
Ignacio, maybe what we'll do is we'll communicate by email or something. Maybe we can get you to pull out maybe 3 images that you haven't really, thought about a lot and do it live with us. Would you do? Maybe would that be possible?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, that'd be cool. Good. John, you want to put the final touch?
Put the note on it. Well, so folks, thank you very much for listening. I assume you've come this far, and I urge you to check out Ignacio's website. You can find the link on the website of We Talk Photo. And if you have any questions, comments, want to see anything else, wetalkphoto@gmail.com. And with that, I think I'll say goodnight to Jack and have a wonderful day, Ignacio.
And
thank
for
you
those
for being here.
For those of you on YouTube, we do have a regular podcast. The same audio will be on wetalkphoto.com and vice versa. We like to do the video part of what we're doing here. And Ignacio, when we sign off here, don't go away. We want to talk to you. John,
thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great talking to you guys.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Good night.
All right, bye-bye.